The galaxy was burning. For many years, countless races fought for power. Planets turned into ash. Cities collapsed into smoke. The war spread like a sickness, and no world was safe. Armies clashed in space, and the sky of every world was filled with fire. Among these endless battles, humans stood weak compared to other alien races. They had courage, but their weapons were small. They had heart, but their ships were fragile. Against the larger empires, humans were always one step away from extinction. But humans were not the only ones suffering. On the far edge of the galaxy, another race was also being destroyed. Their people were proud, but their leaders were desperate. They wanted victory, but they had no more soldiers to give. And so, they searched for another way. That was when they created her. She was not born a monster. She was born a girl, a young alien girl with bright eyes and a soft smile. She once lived in peace, before the war reached her home. But when her people cried for a savior, their leaders turned to dark science. They took her, and others like her, and forced them into something new. The girl screamed as machines cut into her skin. She cried as her body changed. Metal fused with flesh, and glowing veins of alien energy spread across her arms and chest. Her head was shaved clean, and her eyes glowed brighter than before. She was no longer only a girl, she was now a weapon. Her people cheered. They called her the answer. They called her the future. But when she looked at her reflection, she only saw a stranger, a monster in a girl's body. Still, she had no choice. Her world needed her. The war came closer every day. The sky above her planet burned with enemy fire. Great ships blocked the stars, and explosions shook the ground. Everyone prayed for salvation, and the alien girl was pushed forward as their hope. She stood on the battlefield for the first time. The ground shook beneath her feet, covered in ash and smoke. All around her, soldiers looked at her with fear. Even her own people stepped back. They whispered behind her, "She is not one of us anymore." But the leaders did not care. They shouted, "Go, fight, destroy." The enemy was near. Strange machines with claws and wings tore through the air. Soldiers screamed as fire swallowed them. The alien girl clenched her fists, and her body glowed. The transformation was complete. The power inside her burned like fire, demanding to be released. Then the battle began. With a single step, she moved faster than any soldier. With one strike, her hand cut through metal like paper. Energy burst from her chest, burning through the enemy. The battlefield shook as she unleashed her power. Her people cheered again. They shouted her name, as if she was their goddess of war. But when she looked at the bodies around her, the broken soldiers, the burning machines, she felt nothing but sorrow. Every scream cut deeper into her heart. She had saved her people, yes, but at what cost? The enemy began to retreat, terrified of the monster on the battlefield. Smoke covered the horizon, but through the fire, she stood tall. She looked like a warrior made of light and shadow. Yet inside, she felt more alone than ever. The leaders smiled, proud of their creation. They promised victory now that she was their weapon. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She was no longer free. She was a prisoner in her own body, chained by power she never asked for. That night, as the fires burned across the sky, the alien girl sat alone. Her glowing eyes stared at the ground as she remembered who she used to be. She remembered her family, her laughter, her dreams, all gone now, all replaced by war. And in the silence, a question grew inside her heart. Was she saving her people, or had she become the monster that would destroy them all? The war was far from over. The galaxy would burn for many years, and the alien girl would be forced to fight again and again, whether she wanted to or not. But somewhere, across the battlefield, on another broken world, there was a human soldier. He did not know her name. He did not know her pain. But one day, their paths would cross. And when that day came, he would not see a monster. He would see the girl hidden inside the shell. The war had begun. The monster had been born. But the true story, the story of her heart, was only waiting to be told. The night after her first battle was quiet, but it was not peaceful. The alien girl sat on the edge of a ruined city, the fire still burning behind her. The wind carried the smell of smoke and metal. She looked at her hands. They were not the hands she once knew. They were sharper, stronger, glowing faintly with alien light. She remembered how easily they had torn through the enemy, how her body moved faster than thought. It was power beyond imagination, but it was also a curse. She had once been a girl who laughed, who dreamed of the stars. Now, she was something else. Her reflection in the broken glass near her feet was not the same face she remembered. Her skin was harder, her eyes brighter, her veins glowing like fire under the surface. Her head was smooth and bare, shining faintly in the firelight. She felt as if every piece of who she used to be had been cut away and replaced with a shell. The leaders came to her after the battle. Their voices were full of pride. They called her a weapon, the savior of their people. They promised her a place in history, a name that would be remembered forever. But when they spoke to her, they did not use her real name. They called her something else, an empty title, a name for a weapon, not a person. She realized in that moment that to them she was not a girl anymore. She was only a tool. But the war did not allow her time to think. The enemy returned quickly. Days passed like storms, one after another, every time the girl was thrown into battle. And every time the same thing happened. Her body glowed, her fists broke through metal, her voice screamed through fire. The ground shook when she struck, and entire enemy squads fell in seconds. Soldiers from her own side stood back, watching her in silence. Some cheered, but most whispered. They were afraid. Fear was everywhere she went. Fear in the eyes of her enemies. Fear in the eyes of her own people. Even the children, when they looked at her, did not smile. They hid behind their mothers and pointed with wide eyes. She wanted to tell them she was still alive inside, still the girl who once loved the stars. But the words never came. How could they believe her when she no longer believed it herself? Every time she looked at her reflection, she asked the same question. Was she saving her world, or was she becoming its greatest danger? One night, after another battle left the skies filled with smoke, she walked alone among the ruins. Her body still glowed faintly, her steps leaving light behind on the ash-covered ground. She heard whispers following her, soldiers who said she was cursed. They said she was half machine, half demon, no longer alive in the way the rest of them were. She pretended not to hear, but the words cut deeper than any blade. When she closed her eyes, she remembered the day it began, the day her people took her. She had not volunteered. She had been chosen. Chosen because she was young, strong, and full of life. They told her it was an honor, that she would be the one to protect them all. But she knew the truth. She had been stolen from her life, from her family, from everything she loved. Her body had been cut open. Machines had been placed inside. Energy from a dying star had been fused into her veins. She remembered the pain, endless pain, until she stopped feeling like herself at all. She wanted to scream, to escape, but there had been no escape. And when she awoke, her world was gone, and only the monster remained. Still, even as she thought of the pain, there was something inside her that refused to die. A small voice, a memory of who she used to be. Sometimes, in the middle of battle, she would see the stars above the smoke, and she would remember the dream she once had. The dream of flying among them, not as a weapon, not as a killer, but as a girl chasing wonder. That small voice was all that kept her alive. But the leaders never stopped. They pushed her harder. They demanded more. They sent her into battles where no one else could survive. Each time, she returned covered in fire and blood. And each time she felt the little voice inside her growing weaker. Soon, she feared it would vanish forever. And yet, fate was strange, because while she was losing herself, somewhere in the shadows, someone else was watching. A human soldier, one of the enemy, had seen her fight. He had seen the fire in her eyes, and unlike the others, he did not see a monster. He saw the girl hidden beneath the shell, but she did not know this yet. She did not know that her story was about to change for now. All she knew was the silence of the battlefield, the whispers of her own people, and the fire that never left. Her skin, she stood alone, her glowing body casting long shadows on the broken ground. The galaxy called her a monster. Her people called her a weapon. But inside, deep in her heart, she was still a girl afraid, broken, and searching for the One thing no war could ever give her: hope. The battlefield was silent for only a moment, a fragile pause before chaos returned. Smoke hung heavy in the air, and the ground still glowed from the last bombardment. The alien girl stood among broken machines and shattered walls, her body faintly shining in the dim light. Her eyes, cold and glowing, stared across the horizon where shadows moved again. The enemy had returned. This time, they came in greater numbers. The sky tore open with the sound of screaming engines as warships filled the clouds. Metal wings cut through the air, and monstrous machines dropped to the ground like thunder. Soldiers from her people shouted, scrambling to form lines, but everyone knew the truth. Without her, they would not survive. The girl clenched her fists, the energy inside her pulsed, begging to be unleashed. Her chest burned as if a star was trapped within, pushing against her ribs, ready to break free. She hated the feeling, hated how it reminded her she was not normal anymore. She was not like the others. She was their weapon. The enemy charged. The first wave of machines rushed forward, claws scraping the ground, eyes glowing red. Soldiers fired desperately, their weapons small against the steel monsters. Explosions lit the field, bodies fell, and screams filled the night. And then she moved. Her feet struck the ground with such force that the earth cracked. She leapt forward faster than the eye could follow, her body glowing brighter as she tore into the enemy. Her hand punched through metal armor, ripping machines apart. Energy burst from her chest in a wave, throwing entire squads into the air. The battlefield shook as if the planet itself feared her. Soldiers on both sides froze to watch. She was a storm in human form, a blur of light and destruction. No blade could cut her, no fire could burn her. Her voice cried out in rage, echoing across the field like thunder. For every step she took, enemies fell like dust in the wind. But with every strike, every scream, something inside her grew colder. She could feel herself slipping further away from the girl she once was. The battlefield no longer smelled of only smoke and fire, it smelled of her own fear. A fear she kept buried deep, hidden from the eyes watching her. She turned, cutting through another machine, and saw the reflection of her own glowing face in its broken metal. For just a second, she did not recognize herself. She wondered, was she even alive anymore? Or was she only the shell her people had built, filled with fire and rage? The battle raged on. Her people cheered her name, voices rising above the chaos. To them, she was victory. To them, she was hope. But she heard the whispers even as they shouted. Monster, weapon, not one of us. The cheers could not drown the fear. She saw it in their eyes. The enemy retreated, terrified. The machines dragged themselves back, broken and burning. The sky cleared for a moment, and silence returned to the field. The girl stood in the center, glowing, her body covered in blood and ash. She had saved them again. But when she looked around, she saw nothing but distance. No soldier came close to her. No hand touched her shoulder. Even in victory, she stood alone. Her leaders arrived soon after, their voices sharp and cold. They praised her power. They promised her more battles, greater victories, endless glory. But their words felt hollow, like chains tightening around her neck. She was not their hero. She was their prisoner, forced to fight again and again. That night, as the fires still burned in the distance, she wandered through the ruins. Broken walls rose around her like tombstones, the ground littered with weapons and shattered armor. She stopped by a pool of water, its surface shaking with distant thunder. For a moment, she saw her reflection again, the glowing eyes, the hard skin, the body shaped by war. She did not see a girl anymore. She saw the monster they had made. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a faint memory whispered, the memory of stars, shining in the sky before the war, the dream of exploring them, of touching the light. That small dream was all that remained of who she once was. It was fragile, like a flame in the wind, but it was still alive. She closed her eyes and held on to that dream, even as her body pulsed with the power she hated. She whispered to herself in the silence, I am still here. I am still me. But she did not know someone else was watching. On the other side of the battlefield, hidden among the shadows, a human soldier had seen her fight. He had seen the light in her eyes, the sorrow in her face. Even as she tore through enemies like a storm, to everyone else, she was a monster. To him, in that single moment, she looked like a girl trapped inside a cage of fire. Their worlds were enemies. Their armies were sworn to destroy one another. But something in his heart told him this girl was not what she seemed. And though the war was far from over, though blood would cover many more battlefields, their paths were now set. One day, they would meet. And when they did, the galaxy would learn the truth. The battlefield was quiet after the storm of war, but silence in war never lasted long. Smoke curled upward into the night, glowing red from hidden fires. The alien girl walked among the ruins, her body faintly glowing in the darkness, her steps, leaving a trail of ash. Around her lay broken machines, twisted into shapes that no longer resembled life. The air was heavy with the smell of metal and blood. She did not feel victory. She felt empty. Her people were alive, yes, but they looked at her with the same fear as always. Soldiers whispered when she passed. They did not approach her. They never did. She was their savior, but also their curse. Every cheer was followed by silence when she turned her head. She knew they loved what she could do, but not who she was. That night, she stopped near the edge of the battlefield. The fires had faded. Here, and the ground was covered only in shadows. She sat on a broken piece of wall, her glowing eyes staring at the horizon. She tried to remember her real name, the one her family had given her before the war, but the sound of it grew weaker. In her mind each day, the leaders never spoke it anymore. To them, she was only a title, a weapon, a name for fear. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "I am still me. I am still alive." But her voice was small, swallowed by the silence of the ruins. Far across the field, hidden among fallen stone, a human soldier watched her. He had seen her fight earlier. He had seen her cut through machines like they were made of paper, her body glowing like a storm of fire. The other humans had called her a monster. They cursed her name. But this soldier saw something else. When the light hit her face, he did not see rage. He saw sorrow. He saw a girl, not just a weapon. The way her eyes lingered on the fallen, the way her shoulders bent under the weight of silence, these were not the signs of a beast. They were the signs of someone trapped in a cage, too heavy to carry. He should have turned away. His orders were clear. She was the enemy, but something in him resisted. He could not look at her and believe she was only a monster. He stayed hidden, night after night, watching from the shadows. The girl, though she did not know he was there, felt something strange in the air, a presence. She could not explain it, but sometimes, when the wind moved, she thought she was not as alone as she felt. The thought unsettled her, but it also gave her a kind of comfort. Days passed, and battles continued. Each time she fought, the human soldier saw her again. He watched as she unleashed her power, as the ground split beneath her steps, as machines shattered under her hands. But he also saw the way she hesitated when her enemies screamed, the way she turned her face away from the dying. She was not proud of her strength. She carried it like a burden. One evening, after another brutal fight, the human made a choice. He moved closer. The girl stood alone among the ruins, her body dim now, the glow fading with exhaustion. She leaned against a wall, breathing slowly, her face tired, her eyes staring at the sky. For once, she looked small, fragile, almost human. The soldier stepped out from the shadows. His weapon was in his hand, but it hung low at his side. His boots crunched on the broken stone, and the sound made her turn. Her glowing eyes locked onto him. In a flash, she straightened, her body tense, her power ready. He raised one hand, not in attack, but in peace. His voice was soft, almost broken from the dust in the air. "I don't want to fight you." The girl did not answer. Her eyes narrowed, the light in her chest flickering. She could destroy him in a breath. One movement, and he would be nothing. But something in his face stopped her. There was no fear. There was no hatred. There was only understanding. For a long time, they stood in silence. The battlefield stretched between them like a graveyard. Yet in that moment, it felt like the world had gone still. Finally, he spoke again. "I saw you fight. You could have destroyed everything, but you didn't. You held back. You don't want this, do you?" The words struck her harder than any weapon. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever looked at her and seen more than the monster. She felt her throat tighten, but she forced herself to stay silent. The human lowered his weapon to the ground, letting it fall with a dull sound. He took another step closer. They call you a monster, but I don't see a monster. I see someone who didn't choose this. Her body trembled, her light flickered. She wanted to deny it, to drive him away. But deep inside, the real girl who still whispered to herself in the dark, longed to be seen. And in that moment, she felt it. This human, her enemy, had looked past the shell. He had seen her. She took a slow breath, her voice shaking as she whispered her first words to him. I never wanted this. The soldier nodded, his eyes steady. I know. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was fragile, but alive, like a secret waiting to grow. The war still burned around them, but for the first time, the alien girl did not feel completely alone, and though neither of them knew it, yet that single moment to enemies standing face to face, with no weapons raised, was the spark that would change everything. The night air was heavy with smoke, but the silence between them was louder than the war. The alien girl stood glowing faintly in the darkness, her chest rising slowly as she looked at the human soldier. He had lowered his weapon, trusting her with his life, and that trust felt more dangerous than any battle she had fought. No one had ever looked at her that way. He took a careful step closer, his boots crunching softly on the broken stone. His voice was quiet, almost fragile. Why do you fight for them if you don't want this? Her glowing eyes searched his face. She wanted to answer, but the words caught in her throat. No one had ever asked her what she wanted. Her whole life, since the transformation, had been orders, commands, battles. She lowered her head, and for the first time, her voice cracked. Because I have no choice. The human did not move. He simply listened, and that simple act, that stillness, felt more powerful to her than all the cheers of her people. Over the next nights, their paths crossed again. At first, it was brief, stolen moments on the edges of ruined cities. She remained cautious, her body tense, ready to fight if he betrayed her. But each time, he came without raising his weapon. Each time, he spoke softly, asking her questions no one else dared to ask. She told him pieces of her story, little fragments of her old life. She spoke of her childhood, the days when she dreamed of exploring the stars. Before the war stole her future, she spoke of the night she was taken, of the endless pain of the transformation. And though her voice shook, she spoke because for the first time, someone wanted to hear her truth. The human listened, his face steady, his eyes calm. Sometimes he shared pieces of his own life too. He spoke of his home, a small world far from here, with oceans that glowed under the sun and fields of grass that danced with the wind. He spoke of laughter, of family, of small joys she had almost forgotten were real. In those secret moments, a bond began to grow, fragile at first, like a spark in the dark. But with each meeting, it grew stronger. She began to wait for him, even when she told herself she should not. She felt her chest tighten whenever she saw him, not with the fire of her power, but with something she thought she had lost hope. Yet danger always hung above them. If her people discovered her speaking to an enemy soldier, they would call her a traitor. If his commanders learned he had met with her, they would call him a fool and execute him without hesitation. Every word they shared was a risk. Every glance was a secret that could end them both. One night, as the fires of battle still burned in the distance, she asked him a question that had lived in her heart for too long. Do you see me as they do, as a monster? The soldier shook his head without pause. His voice was firm, clear. No, I see someone forced into something she never wanted. I see a girl who still has a soul. Her throat tightened, her eyes flickered with light. For so long, she had lived with whispers of fear and hatred. But now, hearing those words, she felt something inside her heal. The girl she thought had been lost forever stirred again. But the war did not care for bonds. The war was always watching, always waiting to take everything. As the days passed, battles grew fiercer. The enemy pressed harder, and her people demanded more of her power. She was pushed to the front again and again, each time returning more exhausted, more broken. The human soldier saw it too. From the shadows, he watched as she stumbled from battle, her glow dimmer, her shoulders heavy. He knew she was carrying a weight too great for anyone alone. One night, after a battle that painted the skies with fire, he found her sitting among the ruins. Her head bowed. She did not move when he approached. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know how much longer I can do this." He crouched beside her, close enough now that their shadows touched in the firelight. His hand hovered in the air, uncertain, then slowly rested on hers. The touch was gentle, human, real. She froze for a moment, then let out a breath she had been holding for years. "You're not alone," he said softly. "Not anymore." Her eyes lifted to meet his, and for the first time, she believed it. But in the distance, alarms sounded. Her people were calling her back, demanding their weapon, their monster. She stood slowly, her glow returning, her body once again the shell of war. Yet as she looked back at the human soldier, she knew something had changed. The bond between them was dangerous. It could destroy them both. But it was also the first thing that made her feel alive. Again, as she walked back toward the battlefield, she whispered to herself the words he had given her. "You're not alone." And though the galaxy still burned, though both sides demanded her destruction, the alien girl now carried a secret stronger than fear. She carried a bond. The secret bond between the alien girl and the human soldier could not stay hidden forever. Secrets in war were like cracks in glass. Sooner or later, the pressure made them shatter. For many nights they had met in silence, speaking words no one else would dare. But war was a hungry beast, and war always took notice. It happened after one of the bloodiest battles yet. The girl had returned from the field, her body cracked with glowing lines of power, her chest aching with exhaustion. She slipped away to the ruins where she and the human often met, but this time, soldiers from her own side followed. They had seen her vanish too many times. Suspicion had grown like poison, and now the truth was about to be uncovered. When she found the human waiting, she felt a moment of peace. His face was tired, dirt-streaked, but his eyes still carried that steady calm that made her heart believe. They spoke in hushed voices, and when he told her that he believed in her, her eyes softened. But in the shadows, her people were watching. The soldiers stepped forward with weapons raised, their voices sharp with anger. They shouted her title, not her name, and accused her of betrayal. The human froze, reaching for his weapon out of instinct. But the girl raised her glowing hand to stop him. She knew if he fought, he would die in seconds. Her leaders arrived soon after, their expressions filled with fury. They called her a disgrace, a danger, a traitor to her kind. They told her she had betrayed the very people she had been created to protect. Their words cut her deeper than any wound. She wanted to scream, to tell them she was still loyal, that she had given everything. But she saw in their eyes that they had already made their choice. The humans' side soon discovered the truth as well. Scouts returned to their commanders, with whispers of a soldier meeting the enemy's monster in secret. His own people turned on him, calling him a fool, a traitor, a man blinded by weakness. He was dragged before his superiors and ordered to explain himself. He did not deny it. He said only one thing: "She is not what you think she is." But no one listened. In war, there was no room for truth. There was only victory and destruction. The girl was locked away, chains wrapped around her glowing arms, heavy cuffs forged to contain the energy inside her. She sat in the dark, her body dim, her eyes filled with sorrow. She remembered the soldier's hand on hers, the warmth of his voice, the hope he had given her. And now, because of that, she was alone again, more trapped than ever. Her leaders demanded she choose. They told her she could still prove her loyalty, but only if she killed him, only if she destroyed the human who had looked past her shell. They promised her freedom if she obeyed. They promised her honor if she erased him from existence. She sat in silence, her chest heavy, the chains dug into her skin. But it was nothing compared to the pain inside her. She thought of the boy she had once been before the transformation, the girl who dreamed of stars. Would that girl have ever imagined being asked to kill the only one who truly saw her? The human soldier faced his own punishment. His commanders told him to forget her, to abandon the madness. They said if he stood with her again, he would be branded an enemy, hunted until he was nothing but dust, but he refused to turn away. His voice shook, but his words were strong. I would rather die beside her than live in a lie. The war moved quickly after that. Both sides prepared for the greatest battle yet, one that would decide the fate of worlds, and in the center of it all, the alien girl was forced to make her choice. The day came when the chains were broken. They released her onto the battlefield, but this time, it was not victory her leaders wanted. It was a test. The human soldiers stood at the other end, captured and forced to face her. Weapons surrounded them both, waiting for her to strike. Her people shouted for her to prove herself. His people watched in silence, ready to destroy her if she moved. The girl stood frozen, her glowing eyes locked on him. He looked back at her, steady, unafraid. In that moment, the battlefield vanished. There was no war, no armies, no leaders. There was only her and the human, standing together in the firelight. Her chest burned with energy, begging to be unleashed. The voices screamed at her to destroy him, but her heart whispered something else. Her heart whispered the words he had once given her. You're not alone. Her body shook. Her fists clenched. The air trembled with the force building inside her. And then, instead of striking him, she turned and released her power outward, against the weapons aimed at them both. The battlefield erupted in fire as her energy tore through the chains of war itself. Gasps filled the air. Both sides froze. Soldiers stared as the girl stood between their armies, her glow brighter than ever, her eyes fierce and alive. She had made her choice. She would not be their monster. She would not be their weapon. She would fight. Yes, but not for them, not for power, not for control. She would fight for something greater. The girl turned, her hand reaching for the human soldier, and when their fingers touched, a storm rose inside her that could no longer be contained. The battlefield held its breath. Both armies, human and alien, froze as the girl's power exploded outward, ripping weapons from the ground and shattering the chains that had bound her. Fire spread across the ruins, sparks glowing in the dark sky. The alien girl stood at the center, her body burning with light, her eyes blazing brighter than ever before. Her hand held tightly onto the human soldiers, and that single act was louder than all the war cries around them. For the first time since her transformation, she was not standing alone. The leaders of her people screamed, demanding her obedience. They called her a traitor, a failure, a broken weapon. The commanders of the humans shouted too, demanding the soldiers step away, demanding her destruction. But neither of them moved. They stood together in the fire, unmoved by the rage of armies. The girl's chest pulsed with energy, but this time it was not rage or fear that guided it. It was choice. For so long she had been forced to fight, pushed to become what others wanted her to be. But now she finally decided for herself. She would no longer be their monster. The enemy broke first. The alien leaders, furious at her defiance, sent their soldiers charging. Armored troops and machines thundered forward, the ground shaking under their weight. Weapons lit up the night, fire streaking through the air. But the girl did not step back. She raised her glowing hands, and a wave of energy burst outward, tearing through the enemy ranks. Machines exploded into pieces. Soldiers were thrown into the air, and the ground itself cracked open. She fought not as a weapon, but as something greater. Every strike carried her will, her heart, her refusal to bow to either side. The human soldier fought beside her, his weapon blazing, covering her flank. Together, they moved as one, their backs against each other, their bond unshaken even as the world collapsed around them. Both armies watched in shock. They had expected her to destroy the human, to prove herself as their perfect creation. Instead, she was destroying the illusion of their control. Her power was no longer theirs to command. It was hers, and hers alone. The leaders screamed louder. The humans ordered fire on them both. Her own people demanded her death. The battlefield became chaos as soldiers from both sides clashed in confusion. But through the storm, the girl stood like a goddess of fire and light, her body glowing so bright that even the smoke seemed to flee her. She unleashed her full power. Bolts of energy cut across the sky, tearing down ships that hovered above. Waves of fire pushed back entire battalions. She carved a path through the chaos, not for conquest, not for destruction, but for freedom. Every strike was a declaration. She would not belong to them. The human soldier stayed with her, even as the fire scorched the earth. His eyes never left hers, even when death seemed certain. For him, she was not a monster. For him, she was the proof that even in the darkest war, there could be something pure. As the battle raged, the truth became clear. The war had never been about survival. It had been about control. Both sides feared her because she showed what. They tried to hide that power did not need chains, that a soul could not be broken if it chose to fight for itself. At the height of the battle, she stopped. Her body glowed like a star, light bursting from every line of her skin. Soldiers on both sides shielded their eyes, terrified of what she might unleash. The air trembled. The ground cracked, and silence fell as her voice rose above the storm. No. More, she said. Her words echoed across the battlefield, carried by the light. And then she released it all. A wave of brilliance washed across the field, blinding, endless, and pure. It tore through weapons, shattered engines, silenced every gun, but it did not kill. It stripped the battlefield of war itself, burning away the machines of destruction, leaving only people standing, confused, afraid, and silent. When the light faded, she stood trembling, her glow dimming, her body weakened. The human soldier caught her before she fell. Together, they looked out at the armies that had once demanded their deaths. No one moved. No one spoke. The fire of war had been swallowed by something far greater. She was no longer their monster. She was no longer their weapon. She was something neither side had expected. A symbol. A reminder that even in endless war, there was still choice, still hope, still humanity. Even in an alien heart, the soldiers lowered their weapons. The leaders shouted, but their voices carried no power anymore. The people had seen the truth. The girl leaned against the human soldier, her body weak but her eyes alive. For the first time since her transformation, she smiled faintly. He looked at her, and in his gaze, she saw no fear, no doubt, only belief. The war was not yet over. Battles would still come. But everything had changed. She was not alone anymore. She was not forgotten. The galaxy would remember her, not as the monster they had forced her to become, but as the girl who chose her own path, the girl who fought not for destruction, but for freedom. And beside her, a human soldier who saw beyond her shell, who proved that sometimes, in the darkest of wars, all it took was one heart to change the fate of worlds.